I was taken with Eliot's passion, and I frequently encounter when I'm giving speeches at colleges around the country, students like Eliot who are brave enough to stand up for what's morally right and to tell the truth about the Israeli-Palestinian discussion. It takes no bravery at all on campuses today to discredit Israel, to demean it, to libel it, to slander it, and to stand for the pro-Palestinian side of the argument. It takes great bravery to stand up and say what's morally right and appropriate, and Eliot and others like him have been instrumental in driving this argument clearly home on college campuses. I joked last time I appeared with Eliot that I usually speak alone and I speak for 3 hours and take no questions, but today we're going to do about 15 minutes because we want to let you have an opportunity to ask us questions after we've given you an overview of what we're looking at and some of the problems we're confronting. My particular area of interest and study is campus anti-Israelism, how it manifests itself. What are the tropes? What are the images? What is the language that is used to perpetrate this false narrative about Israel being a colonial, settler, imperialistic, militaristic stealer of Arab land, an oppressor, an apartheid regime, all of the other tropes that we hear assigned to Israel, and to see how it manifests itself in student activism, on posters, in speeches, in the language that's used to describe the cause for social justice that the pro-Palestinian side uses as their tool, including the BDS movement, the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, that is the key tactic through which Israel is pummeled in the world community as a way of pointing to its perceived defects. There's a wonderful book by Melanie Phillips, the British columnist, called The World Turned Upside Down. And I think in talking about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, as she does in that book in part, it's a fitting metaphor. The world turned upside down, where truth is turned into fiction, history is turned on its head, facts are ignored in the pursuit of social justice for the Palestinian cause and Palestinian self-affirmation at the expense of Israel. And that where 250 Syrians have been slaughtered in the past 2 years, including 15,000 children, hundreds of thousands made homeless into refugees, that the world has a blind eye for the suffering of anyone else except the Palestinian Arabs who are killed as Israel tries to protect itself from Hamas and their genocidal tactics of lobbing rockets from Gaza into southern Israeli towns. I wanted to show you a few slides to give you an idea of how the brand of Israel, in my terminology, has been hijacked by the enemies of Israel. I teach marketing, and in marketing, as all of you are, I'm sure, aware, we have a concept called branding. What is branding? Branding is giving our product or our country or our organization or whatever we're trying to market an image in a way that is good for our consumers, whoever our users are, whoever we want to sell that product to. We create a brand image. Countries have images as well, because many of you have seen tourism campaigns for England or Israel or any number of countries for the same reason that we market cornflakes. We want people to buy the product. We want them to come to the country, invest in the country, believe that it's a good country to go to. There's also a term, as I mentioned, called brand hijacking. Brand hijacking is when customers are so in love with our brands, such as Apple computers, or Doc Marten boots, or Harley Davidson motorcycles, or Barbie dolls, when they're so in love with our product that they hijack the marketing themselves, they take it on and they promote our brand for us. So as marketers, we're very pleased that people who love our product are promoting the product themselves and are therefore much more believed than we are as the marketers. But a brand hijack can have a negative consequence as well. A brand can be hijacked by the competitors of the brand, or in the case of Israel, by the enemies of the brand. So the narrative about what Israel is has been hijacked by the pro-Palestinian side. The reality of what Israel is has been obscured by the narrative that has been created, a false history, a false accusation of it being an apartheid racist regime, of being a usurper of Arab lands, of having no legitimacy, of being a Zionist regime that has no right and no link to the Holy Land. All of this is a false narrative, but it has created a brand image of what Israel has come to represent. I start off with this poster because it represents how the image of Israel has started to be conflated with and associated with militarism, barbarism, murder, and Nazism. And you'll see in some subsequent slides how, particularly how this accusation of Israel being the new Nazis, a particularly odious and grotesque accusation that my colleague Richard Landis calls moral sadism. The idea that Israel, where many people are actual survivors of the Holocaust, are now being called Nazis themselves, is both ahistorical and preposterous and grotesque. This poster is significant because it shows the current narrative of the Arab Palestinians as being totally innocent, here depicted by a child holding a teddy bear, having done nothing wrong, not throwing stones, not having created terror, not having rejected statehood in 1937, in 1947, in 1967, in 2000, in 2005, and on other occasions. Just an Arab child standing with a teddy bear. And how is Israel depicted? Not even as a person. It's an Apache attack helicopter shooting a child. Cold blood. The blood libel about Israelis, as Jews in the Middle Ages were accused by Christians of killing Christians for blood. Now the same libel is widespread in the Middle East, where Israelis are accused of killing Arab children for blood. And here, what this does is depersonalize Israelis. It makes them into non-persons. It makes them into barbarians. Who would stand up for a country that murders randomly Arab children? No one. That's the danger of anti-Israelism that morphs into anti-Semitism. The danger is that if you continually say that Israel is the worst country on earth, that it suppresses the Palestinians, that it stole their land, that it murders their children arbitrarily, that it's murderous, imperialistic, and all of those other maladies that are assigned to it, who would stand up in defense of Israel? Who could? If Israel, in fact, were the new Nazis, who wouldn't stand up and say we must murder and destroy the new Nazi regime? Francis Boyle was one of the early attackers of Israel and one of the motivators of the BDS movement. And he started this language of crimes against humanity and the fact that the apartheid that he perceived, that he alleged that Israel was practicing, the racism that Israel was practicing, was a crime against humanity. So again, I would say, if in fact this is a crime against humanity, shouldn't the whole world do what they did with apartheid in South Africa and stand up and destroy it? You have to remember something, and I read this recently, and it was a very revealing comment that I want to pass on to you. Even when the world was standing up in the 80s trying to destroy apartheid in South Africa, there was no drive to wipe out South Africa. All they wanted to do was dismantle apartheid. But the BDS movement, Students for Justice in Palestine, and most people on the hard right of the anti-Israel side want to actually obliterate and destroy Israel and replace it with a new Arab state. They don't want to just bring down the wall. They don't just want to pull up the settlements. They want Israel gone. The issue for most people on the hard sides of the argument is not the borders of the new state of Palestine or where Israel would be. The issue for most people on the hard side is not the existence of the Palestinian state, it's the ending of the Jewish state. because the idea of Jewish autonomy in what is considered to be Muslim land forever is abhorrent. So talking about branding, these are some branding examples of how Israel portrays itself, how those of us who have been to Israel, who know what Israel is. When I was there for the first time, I was in a mall in Tel Aviv, and I was sitting there thinking, if you plumped anybody from America in this mall and they didn't know where they were, they would think they were in St. Louis or Los Angeles or Boston, because it looked like America. And Israel, most of Israel shares our values. They have an economy like ours, and a lifestyle like ours. They have values like ours. They have a judiciary like ours, an open press, and all of those other features that make it similar to us. So this is the way that the brand of Israel should be perceived by the world. How is it perceived, however? This is the image because of the brand hijacking that I told you about. Here again, that iconic picture of a Palestinian boy armed with only a stone, David and Goliath. Israel has no human being there. It's portrayed as a tank. And that boy is just fighting for his freedom with a rock. This is a poster campaign that was put up saying Congress, they were asking Congress to stop giving Israel $3.5 billion a year of support over 10 years, $35 billion, to kill Arab children, as if that's the purpose of the money. And here, another one where Israel is shown to be humiliating innocent Palestinians who are trying to do nothing except mind their own business. The great humanitarian and jurist in Canada, Member of Parliament, Irwin Cutler, put this quote up, which I thought was very relevant. He said, in the 20th century, the worst accusation that could be made against you is that you were called a racist. And he said, where did racism most manifest itself? Nazism and apartheid. Well, isn't it interesting that Nazis and apartheid regime are the phrases that we hear all the time about describing Israel? This idea of minimizing the Holocaust or assigning the Holocaust, calling the Nazis the people of Israel now, making Israelis into the new Nazis, minimizes the actual Holocaust, because there's no genocide of Palestinians going on. Their birth rate is skyrocketing. Their lifespans are expanding. There's no genocide. If Israel, with all of its military power, wanted to wipe out every Arab Palestinian in one day, it could do it, obviously, with its air force. They have atomic bombs. There's no genocide going on. When they defend themselves against 15,000 rockets coming from Gaza into southern Israeli towns, and they kill 800 terrorists who are hiding within the civilian population, and some civilians get killed, it's frequently called a genocide. But 250,000 people killed in Syria in 2 years is something of a genocide. 2,000 people killed in Gaza in a defensive war is hardly a genocide. But this idea that Gaza is somehow equivalent to Auschwitz, this is anti-Semitism. This is not criticism of Israel. Calling Israelis, and by extension Jews, Nazis, is an inversion of the truth. It's a minimization of the actual Holocaust. And it's a way of demonizing Israel and Jews by extension, by calling them Nazis, calling never again the Palestinian Holocaust. There's not been a Palestinian Holocaust. When Israel was created, about this dispute over this number, but somewhere between 450 and 650,000 Palestinians left what became Israel. Well, now there's 6 to 8 million Palestinian refugees living in camps. 6 to 8 million. What kind of a Holocaust is that? The Israelis aren't very good at perpetrating a Holocaust if 450,000 Palestinians have turned into 6 to 8 million Palestinian refugees. I just want to, I don't have comments on each of these posters, but I want you to see the imagery, the Jewish star and the swastika juxtaposed. The Auschwitz, Gaza equals Auschwitz. I mean, Gaza has malls and hotels and tourist areas. and a thriving economy. And you and I could go there and visit and live there. It's not Auschwitz. It may not be the greatest country on earth, but it's not Auschwitz. And the idea that you could compare the two is repulsive and grotesque. This is at UC Irvine, I believe. Here's one of these apartheid walls, death to apartheid, Israel, the Fourth Reich. So there's Irwin Cutler's associations of Nazism and apartheid, the worst forms of racism. So if Israel is the most racist country on earth, how could anybody support it? Okay. All right, I'm going to wrap up. I wanted to show you, this was a particularly odious poster from San Francisco State University a while back. It's a soup can with a dead Palestinian baby in it. It says, Palestinian children meat, made in Israel, slaughtered according to Jewish rites under American license. So what is that saying? First of all, it's a resurrection of the blood libel that I was discussing before. The idea that Jews killed Arab or Christian babies for sport, for no apparent reason. And here, the other subtext here is that America, in giving support to Israel, is perpetrating this madness and this murder, and is therefore complicit in this hideous problem. I'm going to stop now so we can each have a time, and then if you folks have further questions about this, we can discuss them later.